Hello, everyone, and welcome to our March Culture Talks, Living with Less. So before we start our panel conversation today, I just wanted to give a couple reminders for the audience today. So currently nominations for the Superior Spirit Awards is open until this Friday. So if you have any students that you would like to nominate, there are several categories for nomination. Remind yourselves to take a look and nominate either your classmates or some students that you've had the opportunity to work with. The winner for the awards receive a $250 cash prize. And then the winners of the awards will be announced at the spring formal happening on Saturday, April 12th. And all staff and students are invited to participate and join in on the spring formal. Tickets are on sale at Suki, and there's a table just over there, and you can purchase tickets there today. They also have information on the Superior Spirit Awards if you would like a little bit more information on those. So welcome everyone. This week it's Sustainable Development Goals, or SDG Week, here at Confederation College. I'm Robin Gillespie. I'm the Manager of Applied Research and Sustainability. And I'm really excited to have a panel conversation today talking about living with less. Just wanted to give a little bit of information, since I do have a little audience, to talk about SDGs and sort of what they are. But when it comes to SDG Week, we're joining colleges and universities from across Canada to increase awareness and engagement with the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs were developed as an urgent call for action to recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations go hand in hand with strategies to improve health and education, reduce inequalities, and spur economic growth, all while managing and tackling climate change and working to preserve oceans and forests. So Confederation College is deeply committed to the SDGs. We're a signatory of the SDG Accord, showing our recognition and commitment to inspiring, celebrating, and advancing the critical role that education plays in delivering those SDGs to 2030. So I mentioned 17 goals. We're not going to go into all 17. I picked sort of two goals that merge around one topic to talk about today. So each of these goals has an impact on waste. And I think waste is a really nice topic to sort of have a conversation about, because it's something that all humans, we all create waste in some way, shape, or form. So SDG 12 is responsible production and consumption. So this SDG is looking at the natural resources used to create products. It's looking at retail and consumer habits, and looking at ways within the waste generation stream to introduce prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse opportunities. This also applies to things like public procurement or what you're buying in your day-to-day life. So that could be anything from food, clothing, anything like that. The second SDG that we're sort of focusing in on is the life on land. So where our waste goes when we're done with it. It has a huge impact, and life on land looks at protecting and promoting our natural ecosystems and properly managing human generated waste so that our ecosystems can maintain their vibrance and their continuation without being deprived by waste. We all see things like waste when, especially right now as the snow's melting, we can see that waste out on our campus grounds. That ends up in the McIntyre River, which goes to Lake Superior, and that waste becomes now a part of that natural environment where it shouldn't be. So our discussions today, we're going to be talking about learning to live with less and ways to reduce the amount of waste that you're creating. Part of this conversation, we want to be able to provide some practical takeaway knowledge that you'll be able to take with you, and hopefully some new habits that you might be willing to try to help reduce your waste footprint. So that's my preamble, but I'm today joined by Leah Amelia and Karen Kirk, and I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit and sort of share a little bit about themselves before we go into some questions. So Karen.
Thank you so much, Robin. Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Kirk. I will explain a few different titles that I have because I probably look familiar to a lot of you because I wear a lot of different hats. So my current day job, I'm the City Studio Coordinator at the City of Thunder Bay. So you see me on campus a lot working on cool collaborative projects with a number of faculty. So super love that role. You might also know me. I've had a natural skincare business for about 20 years called Bare Organics. And it was was started up when my son was born, and I was horrified to learn what was in the skincare products that they were marketing to babies. And I knew I had to do something better for him, and started making products in my kitchen. And I'm still doing it 20 years later, and always happy to kind of share the things that I've learned, and kind of starting and sparking that business has really had an impact on my life and kind of living with less. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everybody. My name is Lee Amelia. I'm the Waste Diversion Coordinator with the City of Thunder Bay. I've been the coordinator for almost a decade now, about 9 years, so it's been quite a while. It's an exciting job. It's ever changing. The world of waste is regulatory driven, and there's been a lot of change in Ontario for the last, especially decade. We have a lot of changes coming in Thunder Bay, so it's an exciting job. I'm originally from the East Coast, so a completely different waste management system there. I grew up with organics being the kind of like a normal everyday thing, and recycling. And I moved to Montreal. I lived there for almost a decade as well before I moved here. So I have kind of a range of different approaches to waste management. I've always been interested in the composting and diversion side of things. And yeah, I look forward to sharing a little information from the City of Thunder Bay's perspective, but also on an individual level. I've always been appreciative and trying to engage in waste diversion strategies as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up the question, and this one's for Lee. Can you give us a little bit of insight on what you see at the Thunder Bay landfill? How much waste is regularly collected in Thunder Bay, and what are the main types of waste or the most commonly seen waste that you see?
There we go. Got it. That's an interesting question. My office is actually located at the landfill administrative building. So I'm not sitting at the hill watching things get dumped, but I do see a lot of vehicles come in, and I often do go up there and engage with the staff and see some things that are happening there. We also have a depot located there for recycling and hazardous waste and e-waste. So there's a lot of traffic in there as well. But there is a lot of material coming to that landfill site, good and bad. And we do our best to offer programs to the public to divert as much of that at the source before it ends up at the landfill site. Once it's in the landfill, there's no pulling it out and starting to sort it. It gets too complex at that point. So residential waste makes up a huge chunk of that. What comes from our houses is about 45% of what we see actually buried at the landfill. About 55% is coming from industrial or commercial or business sources. And there's a big role to play for everybody there. It's a massive amount of waste. I would say on a daily basis, from the garbage trucks that are just picking up residential and ICI waste at curbside, we're filling up about an Olympic-sized swimming pool a week. So it's a massive amount of waste. You can picture at the Canada Games complex the size of that swimming pool. It's massive, and we're burying a lot of garbage there. It's filling in just like it's filling in everywhere else. And just because space is a bit more luxurious in Northern Ontario doesn't mean we have the luxury of just continuing to fill it in and fill it in. It's a costly exercise. It's a regulatory exercise to go through that closing of a landfill, opening a landfill. It's not as simple as it once was to do those sorts of things. So generating waste is what we need to be working on. We need to be reducing it at the source. And that's the trend that we've been seeing, especially in the last decade. We've seen the trend of waste generated go down. And that's what we want to see. We want to see historically over 100,000 tons of waste being buried at the landfill site is now in about a decade gone down by about 20,000 metric tons per year. So that's a massive amount. It's about a 20% decrease over a decade in the amount that we're actually generating before we implement our diversion programs. So we're doing the right thing. We have more and more diversion programs in place, and it's just a matter of getting the word out and having people participate in that.
Thank you. So for both of you, do you lead a lower waste lifestyle, and what inspired you to adopt a lower waste lifestyle?
Thank you. Um, I will probably preface this by saying, as I said, I've had a business for 20 years, and I'm currently a single income household. So I think by necessity, by default, I've become a lower waste lifestyle, just haven't had those resources to like pick and choose, everything that I want to do. Um, I have a Dutch background. We can make some jokes there. But I grew up, like I was shopping at the precursor to Value Village since I was like this tall. It's just like innate in my family. We've always had, like clothing swaps. We've always had like hand-me-downs from cousins. So those sorts of things that I grew up with and then have just kind of adopted and expanded upon now in my adult life and then trying to pass that along to my children. So, and it's something that like we try to do, but we also have a lot of conversations about it on a regular basis so that it's not, it's like top of mind. It's part of our awareness. Um, I get really depressed every time I go to the landfill. I try not to go very often. Um, and I don't know, I think it's an important thing. I'm glad that we're having this discussion today because I think it's a great opportunity to kind of like share some ideas and some tips. And I'll dig into some of those tips later.
So from a personal perspective and also utilizing some of the city's programs, I always try to think of the 6 R's from the city's perspective. There's a lot of R's now. It used to be 3 R's. Now it's just as many R's as you can think of. So we try to reduce, reuse, rethink, refuse things that you don't need, repair items, recycle is the last one. It's an important one, but it's still the last one. We want to be reducing what's coming into the house. So when you're at the shopping market or when you're at the store, you're trying to rethink those items before you take them off the shelf. Is there maybe something with less packaging? Is there maybe a bulk version that's going to save you money down the road and save you waste? Paying attention to what you're putting in your garbage can, like that's something is that we just take for granted, is we just fill up the garbage and we put it at the curb and we think it disappeared. That's something you can rethink, is when you're putting things in the garbage can, what is it? Is it a single use cup from Tim Hortons? Is it something that you can eliminate entirely? Personally, I've tried to make my own coffee and make my own tea and stop going to Tim Hortons and stop going to those places and make it a real commitment. And you see a lot of waste go down in that respect. And I think that's a good start. There's a lot of thrift stores in town, so reusing items, donating items. We offer community treasure exchange days, one in the spring and one in the fall, where we just promote people doing your spring cleanup and then putting it at the curb, putting all those items at the curb that you might be overwhelmed with at home, and putting a free sign on it and trying to donate them to neighbors, or utilize Facebook groups that might be a free everything Thunder Bay group, and trying to donate those items to people who need them or would use them, and just try and make that part of your everyday life.
Thank you. So what is one misconception people might have about reducing the amount of waste that they create?
We're picking our order now. I think there's maybe two. One, and Lee already touched on it, is that when you get rid of stuff from your house and it disappears from the curb, that it just disappears, and it doesn't. So I think that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind. Another misconception I think that people have is that, and I hear this from my kids sometimes, is that it doesn't really matter what we do because of all these like huge industrial things happening around the world. And I think that's just really not true. And I think if we all adopt that it doesn't matter what I do, then suddenly we have 40 million people in Canada that are producing more waste than they need to, because it doesn't matter what we do. So I really encourage everybody to try to, think about what they can do themselves, and that has an impact on the people around you. And collectively, we can start to like increase that 20% decrease and make it maybe closer to 50%.
I really like that point about the individual there. I'm just going to re-emphasize that it might be just taken for granted and thinking, what drop in the bucket am I making by participating in one of these programs? And it could be a big drop. Maybe you're the person who has a whole room full of things that you're storing that it's just overwhelming, and there's a lot of ways to divert that material when you're looking to get rid of it, other than just bringing it to a landfill site or disposing it with regular garbage, taking advantage of that treasure exchange days or donating those materials. You might be the drop in the bucket that actually makes up a big chunk of waste that's coming to the landfill that could have been diverted. I think there's a bunch of ways that people might feel like they're not effective in diverting or making a large impact, but things like recycling. I know there's a lot of controversy about things like recycling, and if I put it in the recycling, will it get recycled? Is it worth recycling? Is it worth composting? Is it worth diverting anything? These programs might not be 100% perfect. A backyard compost bin, you can't throw meat in there, but you can divert a lot of your organic material in there. Up to 30% of your waste could be diverted in a backyard compost bin. And once we have a green bin in place, that'll be 50% of people's residential waste can be diverted through the organic stream typically. The recycling program is still a very important piece, and it is not going directly to a landfill site. It is going to a MRF to get sorted and go to recycling processing facilities that will be marketed to the best of their abilities. So long as there's markets there, things are getting recycled. So it's about doing our part in that process. And it is a challenge to get everything recycled, especially with the new types of products on the market today: plastic components, aluminum foil, film plastics like grocery bags, which are being phased out. But there's a lot of challenging materials, but there's a lot of materials within the recycling stream that are very recyclable, like cans and glass, and certain types of plastic are valuable, and paper and cardboard. There's a lot of value within that recycling program. And so that is one of the common things that keeps re-emerging as, is recycling worth it? And at the end of the day, it definitely is worth it. It's diverting millions of tons of waste from landfill sites across the country. And it definitely helps our local landfill site for sure.
Thank you. And I get asked that question as well, like are recycled products being recycled? So thank you for providing some of that more additional information, because I think some people in the room have asked me that as well in the past. So for each of you, can you share 2 habits you changed to reduce the amount of waste you generate? And how did you do it?
Sorry, that was two things that I've reduced. Yeah. So personally, items that I've reduced, I'm composting, I guess. Maybe I'll throw that in there, that I've always been a heavy composter. So reducing organic waste at my home has always been a priority. I've used a lot of different compost bins, compost styles. There's under the kitchen with vermicomposting bins. There's backyard composters. Some institutions have other composting mechanisms that you can take advantage of, but backyard composting is something I've always done. It's an easy way to divert a lot of waste. There's a proper way to do it and a not so proper way to do it. And we use at the city Eco Superior as a good resource for people to go to get a compost bin and to have some instruction on how to use those things properly. There is some myths around those backyard compost bins, like rats and rodents or skunks or raccoons or anything that could possibly get into those bins, and a fear mongering around using a backyard compost bin. And there's definitely a right way to use them. Not putting meat, not putting dairy, actively putting carbon-based material in there with your food waste, so it's not stinking and smelling and creating an anaerobic condition that is not the way a backyard compost bin is supposed to be used. They're very easy to use and they're very effective, but they do not have to have rats associated with them. That is an entirely different problem from my experience in the waste industry. that's more related to garbage storage on people's properties or unsanitary conditions within a geographic area where there might be problems, most likely with garbage. And compost bins could become a problem based on that problem that needs to be addressed. The city can help address that through bylaw, but neighborly interactions also help. Like if you notice problems that might deter somebody from a backyard compost bin, actually having a conversation with your neighbor can go a long way. Something else that I mentioned earlier is just cutting out single-use cups. So like instead of buying every coffee that I drink, and I drink a couple coffees every morning and a couple teas most afternoons, and I just make it all myself now. It cuts back on a lot of waste, and I think every little approach, again, looking at what you're throwing in your garbage, what's filling up your garbage bin, and then trying to scale back on those purchases. What can you do yourself? And I found it really effective and financially effective too.
I'm a big composter too. I've had compost bins for probably like 20 years, so, and no rat issues at all. So that's false. I'm going to lump my two things into two different categories. One is kind of food related. So like Lee, I make most of my coffee and stuff and tea at home now, but I didn't bring it with me because I had already had my caffeine for today. But I have a lovely like ceramic travel mug that I bring everywhere with me, and I usually leave it in my bag. So if I am going out for coffee somewhere else, I just get it refilled in that cup, and I've done that for years. I did the quick math on like takeout cups from like Tim Hortons, you know, if we're looking at like things that you can do. If you get 2 takeout coffees a day, like that's like 700 wasted paper cups like in a year. And if you do that for a decade, that's like 7,000. The math was up really fast, and it can help you visualize what that waste can look like. So things like my regular reusable coffee mug. This is the water bottle I stole from my son, but I really like it. And now I kind of bring it with me everywhere. And sometimes Level Up. Robin and I talked about this beforehand, but I'm that weirdo that brings my own like Tupperware when I get takeout. This is something I learned in COVID. Some restaurants will actually give you a discount if you bring your own. So I prefer to bring like glass Tupperware with like lids. So I would bring that to like Masala Grill or something, place my order, come back in 20 minutes, and then it's in my packaging. And I just feel much better about using that instead of throwing it out. I think like food delivery, food takeout, those are huge opportunities to reduce waste. There's some really cool initiatives locally, like the Growing Season and Rebel Salad have this like reusable container system that you can invest in like once and then keep reusing them. So that's kind of the food area. And also within that, we try to reduce like single-use plastics as much as possible. Try to discourage my kids from like going to the store and buying like, you know, a single bottle of pop or whatever. We try to get things on larger scale or not go that direction for the food. The other main category I would say is something I focus on a lot that I touched on earlier, but that's things like clothing, makeup. I'm gonna jump right into that. Obviously, I do not dye my hair. I'm not a makeup person. I kind of let that stuff go a really long time ago, and it's so freeing. It's so exciting to like walk through Shoppers and just like whistle past all the really expensive plastic packaged things that are everywhere. I know there's a lot of nervousness for a lot of people to do that. Like they feel like they're going to be naked or something like that. But I encourage you to try it because it's really exciting. And the older you get, the less you care. So it just makes it easier. And clothing. Like I said, I've been secondhand clothing shopping since I was wee, and it's something we've continued. So I have kind of 2 to 3 different groups of friends that we do clothing swaps with kind of on a seasonal basis. And that has grown to not just our clothing and like footwear and jackets to our kids' clothing, footwear, jackets. My kids are men's size now, so it doesn't work for them anymore, but a great thing to start if you haven't done something like that. And we also do things like housewares and stuff like that, and camping supplies. Started kind of coming together with friends instead of everybody getting their own everything. If it's something you're only going to use the odd time, just get one. My ex-husband and I share all of our like power tools, like back and forth, instead of both of us having like lawnmowers and drills and all the things. We just have one set and they go back and forth, and it works really well.
Awesome. Those are really great ideas. And I'll just add one that I do. So about 10 years ago, I made a pact with myself that was basically, I'm not going to buy any new books. I used to buy lots of books and then they would kind of sit there and I donate them or they just kind of fall off and end up, not mine anymore. And I was like, I'm not going to buy books for 1 year. I'm just going to go to the library, use library resources or audiobooks or online books through the library system. And I did it for a year. And I haven't looked back in the 10 years that I started. And I haven't, if I have to buy a book, I do book exchanges sometimes in book club. I go to the used bookstore instead and buy from there or Value Village instead because it just isn't something that I wanted to spend money on anymore. And it's not something I liked having in the house. There's a few books that I've kept that I've really enjoyed, but for the most part, it's something that I just started using the library as a resource for that type of material. And I cut that waste and that sort of budget line out for myself. So loved that one. So just looking at, there we go. Here's sort of our final question for today, but how do you stay motivated to buy less in a world that promotes buying more? A heavy question.
Whew, I know I wrote some good notes about this that I can't recall, so I'm going to wing it. One thing I've really started to question, and I have this conversation a lot with my kids, is who is trying to get me to buy that thing? And what is their motivation? And is it to is it to really help me, or is it to make me feel bad about myself and know that I'll feel better if I buy this thing that will make this company wealthier? So I ask a lot of those questions now. And I've started to really delay. We didn't really get into a conversation about needs and wants, but there's a lot of confusion with those two things I find in our modern day. So now I find if I have something that I feel like I need, I put it on a list and I leave it there for a while. I used to get the Canadian Tire flyer and then circle all the things that would be so helpful. And then I would leave it for a week. And then it's amazing. I would, for the most part, decide that I didn't actually need any of those things. And now I don't even get the flyers, so I'm not even tempted to do any of that. So I guess, sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but I come back and start asking the question, do I actually really need this thing? Or is it just being marketed really well to my demographic? And I know that it's going to be quick, but not sustainable. Then I try to back away from purchasing those things.
So I'll expand a little on what some things Karen's brought up, but I think there's a personal satisfaction piece to when you go about repairing something, or if you refuse something, it's something that generates a personal satisfaction that just buying something and having it doesn't offer you. Every once in a while you'll buy something that really makes you feel happy, but it's not that often. Usually it's something that's just taking up space that you're not using. And when you repair something, let's say your dryer breaks, if you get that repaired as opposed to throwing it away and going and getting a new one, there is a sense of satisfaction there that you're not going to get if you bought a new one and then it breaks in 3 years anyways. And you say, man, that's junk. They're just making junk. And I'm buying the junk, and they're making more junk, and I'm buying more junk. We need to stimulate our local economies by sharing and trying to repair things, trying to seek that information out, and just trying to stimulate ourselves and our economies and our communities. And I think there's a lot of community building that happens here too when we seek out. Robin was mentioning Reddit. There's certain groups on Reddit or on Facebook. There's certain groups on Facebook that will share items like Karen was talking about, where you don't need to buy things. There was a group on there called 333 Collective where I used to reach out there frequently and just ask, I need a dehydrator for a camping trip I'm going on, and I would get one for free. I would just use it and give it back. And there's a lot of instances like that where we can seek that information out. The city has, since we're wrapping up, the city's got one other resource that is pretty useful. It's called a Waste Wizard. Some of you may be familiar with it, but it's a one-stop shop. You go on there on the city website or the Thunder Bay Waste and Recycle app, and you can look up any item that you're looking for and find out where you can dispose of it properly in town or divert it. And if there's anything that's not in that system, or you don't see an option of where to bring it or how to divert it, you can make a suggestion and we'll update that, so that we're trying to promote local options and more diversion options locally. And we're trying to push that more now that it's available. It's still a new-ish tool, and we're going to promote that more and more as the years go on. But that's one resource that everyone can lean on a little bit if you're feeling stuck of how do I get rid of something properly.
Awesome, thanks. And I've actually used the Waste Wizard a few times when we're trying to navigate, where should mini fridges be going, those types of things. And it is a really, really great resource if you're trying to find the proper spot for something to land in terms of waste. But I do want to thank the panelists today for this discussion. I think you guys brought up some really great points, some practical advice. When it comes to the Reddit forum, I was having a conversation with a colleague this morning, and they mentioned a thread that's called Buy It for Life, and it kind of gives perspective and thought on different types of whatever you're looking to buy, whether it's, a backpack or a dryer or a fridge, just some really good information from firsthand users of that on the Reddit thread. But I didn't know about that, and I kind of explored it a little bit, and got some really good tips from just looking at that briefly this morning. And I'm a researcher when it comes to trying to figure out what to buy next when I'm in that purchasing position, and having those sort of firsthand accounts really does help when you're trying to make purchasing decisions. But a big thank you to Lee and Karen for coming today, sharing some insights. And another reminder to nominate a student or students for the Superior Spirit Awards. Get your tickets for the spring formal, and lunch will be served as well at the back if you have a ticket. But thank you everyone for coming out today and learning a little bit more on living with less. Thanks.